powerful CEO hired a struggling single dad to drive her after an accident left her in a wheelchair. But what began as a simple driving job slowly turned into trust, healing, and an unexpected bond. When everyone around her doubted she could lead again, he became the one person who helped her believe she could take one more step. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The first time Kieran Holt met Celeste Marlowe, she was not the powerful woman from magazine covers. She was outside a private medical building in Chicago, sitting in a wheelchair under a gray sky, trying to stop a folder of papers from sliding into a puddle. People passed her without slowing down. Some recognized her. Kieran could tell by the way their eyes widened, then quickly looked away. Celeste Marlowe was the CEO of Marlowe Dynamics, a clean energy company worth more than most people could imagine. But in that moment, she looked less like a billionaire executive and more like a woman fighting to keep one bad day from becoming worse. Kieran parked the black sedan by the curb and stepped out. He was 37, a single dad, and tired in the way only parents can be tired. His daughter, Poppy, had drawn a small purple star on his wrist that morning and told him it was for luck. He had smiled then, even though he was worried about rent, school fees, and the long hours this new driving job would demand. Now, as rain darkened his jacket, he crouched and gathered Celeste's papers from the ground. He did not stare at her chair. He did not speak to her like she was fragile. He simply placed the folder back across her lap. Celeste looked at him with cold blue eyes. "You're not my usual driver." "No, ma'am," Kieran said. He called in sick. "I'm the replacement. I don't like replacements." "I'll try not to make that personal." A small flicker crossed her face. Not a smile. Not yet. Her assistant, Audra Vinn, hurried out of the building with a phone pressed to her ear. "Ms. Marlowe, the board moved the call up. They're already waiting." Celeste's jaw tightened. Kieran noticed the change immediately. The rain, the papers, the wheelchair, none of it had shaken her. But those words did. "The board can wait 3 minutes," Celeste said. Audra lowered her voice. "They're asking if you're still physically prepared to lead the presentation." For the first time, Kieran saw something behind Celeste's sharp expression. Fear. She covered it quickly. "Get in the car," she said. Kieran opened the rear door and lowered the ramp. Celeste moved toward it with practiced control, but the front wheel caught on the metal edge. Her chair jolted. Audra gasped. Celeste froze. Kieran stepped forward but stopped before touching the chair. "May I?" he asked. Celeste stared at him. Most people either grabbed too quickly or backed away like her chair was a warning sign. Kieran did neither. After a moment, she gave one small nod. He adjusted the ramp angle, locked it properly, and guided the chair with steady hands. Not rushed, not pitying, just careful. Inside the car, Celeste looked out the rain-streaked window. "You've done this before," she said. Kieran closed the door gently, then got behind the wheel. "My daughter used a chair for 8 months after surgery," he said. Celeste turned slightly. "She's okay now. She walks, runs when she's trying to avoid homework." That almost made Celeste smile. Almost. The car pulled away from the curb. For a while, only the sound of rain filled the space between them. Then Celeste's phone buzzed. Audra's voice came through the speaker, tense and low. "They're saying if you miss this vote, they'll move forward without you." Celeste's hand tightened around the phone. Kieran looked at her in the rearview mirror. She looked powerful, but she also looked alone. And something in him knew this job was not going to be just about driving. The board meeting was not held in a warm conference room with friendly faces. It happened inside the back seat of Kieran's sedan through a tablet balanced on Celeste's lap while Chicago traffic crawled under the storm. Kieran kept his eyes on the road, but he could hear enough. A man named Graham Vale spoke first. His voice was smooth, polished, and quietly dangerous. "Celeste, no one is questioning your intelligence. We're questioning whether you can continue carrying the company through this transition." Celeste's face did not move. "That sounds like questioning my leadership. It's a practical concern." "No," she said, calm but sharp. "It's an opportunity dressed as concern." Kieran's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. He had heard voices like Graham's before. Men who never raised their tone because they didn't need to. They cut people down with soft words and clean grammar. Celeste answered every question with precision. Numbers, contracts, deadlines, risk reports. She was brilliant, and everyone on that call knew it. But then Graham said the thing he had been waiting to say. "The investors need confidence. Seeing you return in person would help." A silence settled in the car. Celeste's eyes lowered to her legs. Kieran saw it in the mirror, and for a moment, the powerful CEO vanished. What remained was a woman who had spent months being measured by what she could no longer do. The accident had happened 11 months earlier. Kieran learned that later. A late-night drive, black ice, the delivery truck losing control. Celeste survived. Her fiancé walked away from the engagement 3 months after. The company called it medical leave. The gossip pages called it tragedy. Celeste called it none of those things. She simply worked. The call ended with no victory, only a deadline. Graham wanted her at the investor showcase in 4 weeks. In person, on stage. When Kieran pulled up to her penthouse building, Celeste did not move right away. "I know what you heard," she said. "I heard people talking around the truth." "And what is the truth?" Kieran looked at her in the rearview mirror. "They're not waiting for you to fail. They're trying to make you feel like you already have." Celeste looked away. For once, she had no quick answer. That night, Kieran missed Poppy's recital by 12 minutes. He arrived just as the parents were standing to clap. Poppy saw him from the stage in her little yellow dress, and instead of looking hurt, she waved like he'd saved the whole evening by showing up at all. That broke his heart more than anger would have. Later, while Poppy ate cold fries in the kitchen, she noticed the tiredness in his face. "New boss mean?" she asked. Kieran smiled faintly. "Complicated, like fractions." "Worse." The next morning, Celeste requested him again. Then the next day. Then the day after that. Their drives became strangely quiet rituals. He learned she hated being called inspirational. She learned he packed 2 lunches because Poppy always forgot hers. Celeste noticed details people usually missed. The worn cuff of his jacket, the children's sticker on his dashboard, the way his voice softened whenever his daughter called. One evening, Celeste asked, "Why did her daughter need surgery?" Kieran did not answer immediately. "Spinal correction," he said. She had a condition that made walking painful. The doctors were good, but she hated therapy. Hated everyone telling her to be brave. Celeste stared out the window. And what helped? Kieran thought of Poppy gripping parallel bars, crying from frustration, furious at her own body. Not motivation, he said. She didn't need speeches. She needed someone to stand there and not look scared when she was scared. Celeste went very still. The next day, she asked him to drive somewhere that was not on the schedule. A private rehabilitation center near the lake. Inside, the air smelled like clean floors and quiet effort. Celeste moved through the hallway like she owned the building, but when they reached the therapy room, her hands tightened around her wheels. "My doctor says there's still a possibility," she said. "Not a promise. A possibility." Kieran stood beside her. "Then why haven't you started?" Her laugh was small and bitter. "Because possibility is cruel when everyone is watching." He understood then. This was not about walking on stage to impress investors. This was about Celeste being afraid to hope in front of people who might use her failure against her. A therapist came in, but Celeste dismissed him after 10 minutes. Her breathing turned sharp. Her face paled. She said she was done. Kieran did not argue. He only picked up her coat and waited. At the doorway, Celeste looked back at the parallel bars. "I used to run before sunrise," she said quietly. "No cameras. No assistants. No board. Just me and the lake." Kieran's voice softened. "Maybe don't start with running." She looked at him, and something warmer passed between them. Small, careful, dangerous in its own way. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. Kieran knew he should say no. He was her driver, not her therapist. He had a daughter, bills, a life already stretched thin. But Celeste wasn't asking like a CEO. She was asking like someone standing at the edge of a room she was afraid to enter alone. So he nodded. "I'll come." The next 2 weeks changed everything. Kieran drove her before sunrise, when no one from the company could see. He sat by the wall while she worked with Dr. Julia Mercer. He never cheered too loudly, never pitted her, never rushed her. When she failed, he handed her water. When she snapped at him, he gave her space. When she made progress, he let her own it. And slowly, Celeste began to trust him. Not because he saved her, because he didn't try to. One morning, after therapy, they sat in the quiet car, facing the lake. Dawn painted the water silver. Celeste looked at the purple star still faintly marked on Kieran's wrist. "Your daughter drew that?" "Poppy says it keeps me from making bad choices." Celeste's smile was real this time. "And does it work?" Kieran looked at her longer than he should have. "Not always." Her smile faded into something softer. Neither of them moved. Then Celeste's phone rang. Audra's name flashed on the screen. Celeste answered. Audra sounded breathless. "You need to come to the office." Graham called an emergency board session. Celeste's expression hardened. "What did he do?" A pause. "He's trying to remove you before the investor showcase." Kieran looked at her in the mirror. The fear was there again. But this time, something else stood beside it. Resolve. The emergency board session began at 9 in the morning, but Graham Vale had clearly started it long before Celeste arrived. By the time Kieran drove her to Marlowe Dynamics, the glass tower was already humming with whispers. Employees stood in small groups near the lobby, pretending not to watch as Celeste entered through the side access door. She wore a cream suit, simple gold earrings, and no expression at all. But Kieran knew her hands were hurting. He had seen the way she gripped the wheels too tightly whenever fear moved through her body. He had seen how pain tried to pull her inward and how pride forced her shoulders back. At the elevator, Celeste looked up at him. "You don't have to come in." Kieran held her gaze. "You asked me to drive you here. That part is done." "No," he said gently. "It isn't." For a moment, the lobby noise disappeared around them. Celeste looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, She nodded once. The boardroom was colder than it needed to be. Graham stood near the head of the table, surrounded by folders, lawyers, and men who looked sorry without being brave enough to act sorry. Celeste, Graham said smoothly, this is not personal. Celeste moved to her place at the table. People only say that when they know it is. A few eyes dropped. Graham explained the proposal like a man discussing weather. Temporary leadership transfer, public confidence, investor protection, a clean transition until Celeste was fully recovered. Kieran stood near the wall, silent. He knew this was her fight, and Celeste fought it without raising her voice. She opened her tablet and presented everything Graham had tried to hide. Delayed reports, private investor calls, a quiet attempt to pressure department heads into backing him before the showcase. Audra had found the paper trail, but Celeste had connected the pattern. Graham's face changed slowly, not with shock, with the anger of a man who thought he had been careful. You had your assistant investigate me? He asked. Celeste looked at him. No. I listened when people were afraid to speak. That landed harder than any insult. The vote did not go Graham's way. He was placed under review by the ethics committee before noon. No dramatic scene. No guards. No public humiliation. Just consequence, clean and quiet. But for Celeste, the harder battle still waited. The investor showcase came 3 days later. 1,000 people filled the hall. Cameras lined the back. Her team stood near the stage, nervous, loyal, and silent. Kieran stayed beside Poppy in the second row. Celeste had invited them herself. Poppy wore a blue dress and held a small paper star in her hand. Dad, she whispered, is she scared? Kieran looked at Celeste waiting near the ramp, her face pale under the stage lights. Yes, he said, but scared doesn't mean stopped. Celeste began the presentation from her chair. She spoke about energy, responsibility, and building technology that served people instead of egos. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. The room listened. Near the end, she paused. I spent months believing leadership meant never letting anyone see weakness, she said. I was wrong. Real leadership is knowing when to accept help and still choosing the next step yourself. The hall went quiet. Dr. Julian stood near the side stage. Kieran held his breath. Celeste placed her hands on the armrests. Slowly, carefully, with the brace hidden beneath her tailored trousers, she rose. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but honestly. One step, then another. No one clapped at first. They were too stunned by the effort, by the silence, by the raw truth of it. Then Celeste reached the podium standing. Her eyes found Kieran. He did not cheer. He only pressed 2 fingers gently over the purple star on his wrist. Celeste smiled. Weeks later, she no longer needed Kieran as a daily driver. That should have been the end. Instead, one evening, she arrived at a small school auditorium where Poppy was performing in a spring music show. She slipped into the seat beside Kieran, wearing a soft green dress instead of a suit. You're late, Kieran whispered. Celeste glanced at him. I'm early. He smiled. On stage, Poppy spotted them both and grinned, so wide she almost missed her first note. Celeste laughed quietly, and Kieran heard something in it that had not been there before. Peace. When the song ended, Celeste's hand rested near his on the armrest. Neither of them rushed. Neither of them needed a perfect promise. But when Kieran gently took her hand, Celeste let him. And this time, she did not pull away.